So as you guys all know, MSNBC is no friend of Bernie Sanders. You know, they may have once upon a time started out as a progressive alternative to corporate media, but, you know, as years have gone by, ever since the last election, since 2016, they've become increasingly more and more hostile towards all progressives, but especially towards Bernie Sanders. You know, this goes from anywhere between lying about poll numbers, hiding poll numbers, trying to smear him, the works. And so recently, ever since Bernie Sanders has cemented his position as the frontrunner in this Democratic primary of 2020, their attacks have become more and more hostile and more overt. So one of these was by Chuck Todd, and I mean, this was really disgusting. I couldn't believe my eyes when I heard about this, when I saw this. So essentially what happened was he was doing one of his segments, and he read a quote that someone had made about Bernie Sanders in Bulwark, which is like a right-wing publication. Even though this didn't come from Chuck Todd, I mean, to call it distasteful is an understatement. Okay, so I'm going to show you what he said now.
Hey, I want to bring up something that Jonathan last put in the Bulwark today, and it was about how, in Ruth, we've all been on the receiving end of the Bernie online brigade. And here's what he says. He says, no other candidate has anything like this sort of digital brown shirt brigade. I mean, except for Donald Trump. The question no one is asking is this: what if you can't win the presidency without an online mob? What if we now live in a world where having a bullying agro-social media army running around, popping anyone who sticks their head up is either an important ingredient for or a critical marker of success?
Wow. Okay, that's
I know.
So what that quote did essentially was liken Bernie Sanders supporters to Nazis. Brown shirts, which is what the Nazis used to wear in the 1930s. They had brown shirts. And I mean, that's just... Is disgusting really sufficient to describe that? I mean, this is wrong on so many levels. It's just... Also, make your minds up. Is he a socialist or a Nazi? Which one is it? They can't even make their minds up on how they want to smear Bernie. It's unreal. But this is just bad for so many reasons. I mean, first of all, that's completely ridiculous. Bernie supporters are some of the nicest people I've ever met. I mean, the whole movement is based on compassion for one another. It's about helping out minorities. It's about helping out the working class. It's about helping out the poor. That's the first thing, okay? I mean, not to mention that you're calling the followers, the supporters of a Jewish guy who had his father's family butchered in the Holocaust, you're calling them Nazis. I mean, this is just... I'm speechless. I really have no words. This is really messed up. I don't understand what Chuck Todd was trying to achieve by reading that out. What was the point of that? I mean, it's distasteful at best. What it really is, though, is disgusting. It's revolting. It's horrifying. Why would you read that out loud? Why would you quote someone like that? Like, you can clearly tell that this is a garbage, really nasty statement that has no basis in reality whatsoever. Why are you reading it out loud? What kind of point are you trying to make? What this does also is perpetuate this myth that, oh, the Bernie bro, they're so aggressive online. Oh my God. Yeah, this is nonsense. They make this up to shirk off any valid criticisms that you make of the establishment or people who are in the political apparatus. If you call Bernie supporters or anyone who criticizes you a Bernie bro, you essentially strip them of their identity and then cast them away, you know. And the whole thing, the term Bernie bro, is quite sexist and racist because Bernie Sanders has the most diverse coalition of supporters of any candidate. We're talking about young people, working class people, Latino, white, black. No other candidate has built a movement like that. And so by calling them a Bernie bro, you're just assuming that they're male, that they're white, and that's it. Basically, you're implying that people of color don't matter. You're implying that women don't matter. Et cetera, et cetera. That's why it's really a nonsense term. I really don't understand that. And I really respect Bernie Sanders. I admire his patience facing these kinds of atrocities in the media every day without fault. And most notably on what most people would consider lefty networks. You know, it's really ironic how you have right-wing networks like Fox News cutting Bernie more slack than these pieces of trash at CNN and MSNBC. I mean, it's really something remarkable. This is just one example of MSNBC's onslaught against Bernie Sanders. And, if you haven't been paying attention in the last election, man, they were doing, I mean, it wasn't this bad, but it was pretty bad. There was actually a media blackout against Bernie Sanders. So last time they wouldn't cover him. They didn't want to give him any attention or any airtime or free publicity or recognize the movement that he had built. Now they do, but they want to dunk on it. They want to dismantle it. They want to attack it every chance, every way they get, even using far right and right-wing news outlets and quoting madness like this just for the sake of smearing Bernie Sanders, because then they can say, oh, we didn't mean it. I was just reading a quote. Yeah, but why are you reading that out loud? Why are you saying that and bringing that up? I mean, this is really abhorrent, comparing brown shirts to Bernie supporters. And I think it's a perfect example of how Americans are really disconnected from history and reality. They just don't understand what happened in Germany, in Europe, in the 1930s. They just don't comprehend it, because if you really understood history, if you were really educated on this, you would never even think to say something so disgusting like that. It's truly horrifying. It really is. Now, moving on, because we're not done. This is just the first example. We also had Chris Matthews. I'm sure some of you have maybe heard of the madness that this guy was rambling on about. I mean, this guy is really a rambling fool. He is going on rants on television about things that he has made up in his mind. It's really quite astounding. So I'm just going to show you this clip from MSNBC from a panel, and just listen to what Chris Matthews had to say about Bernie Sanders.
I don't want to get into I'm on every night. I let the Democrats figure this out. I have my own views of the word socialist, and I'll be glad to share them with you in private. And they go back to the early 1950s. I have an attitude about them. I remember the Cold War. I have an attitude towards Castro. I believe if Castro and the Reds had won the Cold War, there would have been executions in Central Park, and I might have been one of the ones getting executed. And certain other people would be there cheering, okay? So I have a problem with people who took the other side. I don't know who Bernie supports over these years. I don't know what he means by social. 1 week it's Denmark. We're going to be like Denmark. Okay, that's harmless. That's basically a capitalist country with a lot of good social welfare programs. Denmark is harmless.
He's pretty clearly in the Denmark category, yeah.
Are you sure? How do you know? Did he tell you that?
Well, I mean, that's what he says, and that's what his agenda calls for, right?
Yeah.
He's not calling for any...
Let's see. Let's figure that one out.
But we haven't seen a campaign yet where video of him praising the other version,
right,
which is Castro, has been used. Well, but it will be used.
That's a question
of how that plays.
Of how what the effect that has.
Well, what does he think of Castro? That's a great question. What did you think of Fidelismo? We all thought he was great when he first. I think cheering like mad for him when he first went in, and then he became a communist and started shooting every one of his enemies.
Okay, hold those thoughts on the queue. Hold those.
I mean, what was that? You really must be going far when Chris Hayes has to come and reel you back in. What are you talking about? Executions in Central Park? What kind of comparison are you trying to draw here? Also, I find it really highly amusing that he is concerned about Cold War executions in public. When the United States had no problem backing right-wing militias in South America that would do exactly that would just, execute political opponents in public, hang them, whatever. I really find that ironic. So, but also this is just ridiculous. He's also playing dumb, like, oh, I don't know if Bernie Sanders means the kind of socialism that they have in Western European countries like Denmark and your Scandinavian countries like Denmark. No, you know damn well that's exactly what he means. What are you talking about? Socialism, if you look at France, if you look at Germany, if you look at the majority of Western European countries, they have very, very, very powerful socialist parties. Matter of fact, I can't even count how many decades socialists have been in power in France, for example, which is one of the United States' biggest allies. Do you understand the point here? Many of the United States allies are socialist countries, and he acts like Bernie Sanders doesn't want that. No, Bernie Sanders wants, communism. You know better than that. Stop playing dumb. And what kind of seed are you trying to plant in people's minds about public executions? What? When has Bernie Sanders ever advocated for something even remotely bad or violent? Just this week, he was once again apologizing. I don't know why he does that. He's not accountable for people online, but he was once again saying that, oh, don't be mean online and stuff. Man, I mean, Bernie Sanders doesn't even tolerate his own supporters, even if it's just like a 1% of them, not even, being remotely hostile online. Never mind executions in public. What are you rambling on about? I mean, this is just either blatant ignorance or malfeasance. I don't know what it is, but there's something up with Chris Matthews, and this is not the first outburst that he's had in recent weeks. Just disgusting. It really is. Once again, they try to liken Bernie Sanders to some kind of polar opposite on the political spectrum, when in fact he is really a center figure by anyone's standards. If Bernie Sanders was a politician in Europe, believe me, he would not be considered a lefty. He would just be a center-ish figure. Yes, it's really that underwhelming. I'm sorry to inform you. Many communists actually consider Bernie Sanders to be too soft for them. And they think Bernie Sanders is the compromise option for communists. Okay? I mean, anyone with a basic grasp of what socialism and communism is would know that Bernie Sanders is nowhere near enough for anyone who would be a communist or like an avid believer in whatever you're talking about. No, he's not. He's just not. I'm sorry. Like, he doesn't fit that in any way, whether we're talking about economic policies or foreign relations. Nothing about Bernie Sanders' policy platform is far left. It really isn't. He's not saying we want public ownership of private businesses. Nothing. There is nothing far left about it. This is once again an example of Anglo-centrism or Anglo-American centrism, viewing the world from an American point of view that, if you are anything to the left of us, then you are a communist. No, that's not how it works, okay? And once again, he's telling you himself that he's very much marked by the Cold War, which is a reality that you have to reckon with, because a lot of people, boomers especially, they grew up with this constant bombardment and fear of the Soviet Union, etc. And so for them, they associate the word socialism with communism, even though there are distinctions. I mean, this is political science. There's many levels to this. So there is a bit of a challenge of deprogramming that needs to be done to make people understand that, listen, you have communism, and then you have social democracy, democratic socialism, you have mixed economies. You need to break this down for people, because it's not that apparent, okay? It's not that apparent to everybody, especially if you watch MSNBC. I mean, if that's your source of news, yeah, I don't think most people get it. You need to break it down to them. There is a deprogramming effort that needs to be undertaken. But anyway, I mean, that's if we're giving Chris Matthews the benefit of the doubt. But I'm assuming that he does know better. He's just paid to pretend that he doesn't. Okay, the checks at MSNBC come very thick and large. Okay, you suddenly know nothing about political science and everyone is a socialist to you. So this is just the second outburst the first outburst of many that we've seen in the last few weeks. On the eve of the Iowa caucus, he was once again trashing Bernie Sanders on an MSNBC panel, and it's just so bad to watch. Take a look.
What are my thoughts? I'm not happy. I'm not happy with this field. I think they got to find a candidate for president that can beat Trump.
And you don't think anybody in this field
I'm looking. I'm still looking.
Still looking.
What's the problem?
Obvious problems. They're all problems. Bernie Sanders is not going to be president of the United States. Okay? I went back to the 72 race. I was a young volunteer for the DNC. I was working for a senator from Utah at the time. I've got to tell you, it feels a lot like it. A lot of giddiness, a lot of excitement, a thrill about this guy.
You're saying a lot like McGovern?
Well, exactly, because he was very excited. He excited the party, completely blew away a really good candidate like Muskie, a really good guy. He blew him right out of the water because he had some issues. Now, analytically, I think a couple things have happened. One is Warren was riding high. I thought she was going to sweep through everything. I should first too easily and just keep going. She was the one candidate I thought could do that. What happened? She got a lot of scrutiny. You don't want a lot of scrutiny, and she got a lot of it. Does this stuff add up? The Medicare for all, the free college, all that stuff got killed. And guess who's going to get it now? Bernie's going to get it now. Bernie's going to ride high, and he's finally going to get scrutiny about his whole life, his ideology, his whole life, who did he root for all his life. Who is this guy ideologically? It's not just the nice, good stuff like health care. Why does he say the stuff he does about Dore and people like that? Why does he say Denmark one week and then somebody else? I mean, people got to figure out who the guy is.
Yeah.
I think I know, because I've dealt with these guys most of my adult life. They're usually the guys at the card tables at an anti-war rally. There'll be there some old guy with some old literature from this socialist party to that, trying to sell it, trying to latch on to the anti-war movement. There's always guys like that. And they're usually, you know, as Howard Fine once said, non-negotiable demands, you know, yelling up at the administration building during the anti-war movement. I know them, but I think the country's going to get to know them. I think we got a problem. We'll see. But, you know, nobody's going to say it tonight. They're all going to be cheering. Good old Bernie. You know, I think he's going to win big tonight. Real big. Real.
I mean, once again, he is rambling and just going off on tangents. Unbelievable, you know. He's basically accusing Bernie Sanders of being some sort of Trojan horse or some Manchurian candidate who's trying to infiltrate the presidency and wants to secretly bring about communism. I mean, it's really fear-mongering and ignorance and manifest. And it's sad to watch, you know. Like, dude, give it a rest. I don't want to watch your incoherent rambling. He doesn't even mention one single policy. Like, at least converse on substance. At least bring about a conversation about substance, you know, like real talk. Like, okay, I don't like this paragraph in this page in Medicare for All. I think we could do it this way better. No, platitudes and riddles and fearmonger and, you know. I mean, look, man, if you wanted to make valid critiques of Bernie Sanders, you can. There are things you can bring up. Maybe, you know, that he should have a bit more than 20 or 30% black support. Yes, that is a valid critique. You can also bring up things about foreign policy. Sure, these are very valid critiques. They need to be addressed, and we must address them if Bernie Sanders gets the nomination. But this, what they're doing on MSNBC, no, this is blatant fear-mongering. They're trying to dismantle his candidacy because he's a threat to the establishment. I mean, we all know this, right? We've experienced this before. We've seen what they do. We've seen how they treated their own journalists in 2016. You know, correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember that a couple of people got fired from MSNBC for covering Bernie Sanders. I don't know if Crystal Ball was one of them, but I think Ed Schultz was fired for trying to cover Bernie Sanders. Like, there was a real media blackout. And if you tried to cross the line, I mean, it was game over for you. So we know what kind of practices they engage in internally in MSNBC to make sure that public opinion doesn't go too favorable towards Bernie Sanders. That's putting it mildly. So we know what kind of corporation they are. Okay. And this is not just them, obviously. You know, you guys have seen my videos on CNN as well. There is a real bias in the news media apparatus against Bernie Sanders. This is a fact. I mean, to deny that at this point is lunacy. You're burying your head in the sand if you think otherwise. They're not treating him fairly, right? Even with Andrew Yang, there was a media blackout this time around, right? So this is not just limited to Bernie Sanders always, but yeah, here they're going on the offense. They're really trying to like throw the kitchen sink at him, you know, everything. It's truly remarkable. And if you guys think that this is bad, just wait till he gets the nomination. You think that because Bernie Sanders is the nominee, if he gets it, and again, they're going to try everything to stop him. Even if he gets the nomination, man, they're going to go harder. Believe me, because they would rather Trump than Bernie Sanders. Yeah, that's the sad reality. I'm sure you all know this. They would rather someone like Donald Trump because he's rich, he's part of the establishment, he's billionaire. He's not going to overhaul the system. He's not going to make structural changes or implement any sort of reform. No, of course not. Look at what he did in his presidency. He gave all the rich people enormous tax cuts. That's what he does. This benefits all of these people. You know, Chris Matthews, Chris Hayes, all these people, Chuck Todd. These are millionaires, man. They're part of the 1%. They're in the same bracket as someone like Donald Trump. So, of course, they want someone like Donald Trump, who's one of their peers, to maintain that office, rather than someone like Bernie Sanders, who is going to come along and, you know, start making them pay their fair share and shape up. No, they're not going to vouch for that. It's not happening. So this is the unfortunate reality of MSNBC, you know, and this doesn't just stop at the anchors, at the hosts of MSNBC. It's also the guests that they bring on, you know, like Neera Tanden, Jesus. And earlier this week, they also had James Carville. This is a guy who worked with Bill Clinton. He came on, I think it was Morning Joe, and he was on MSNBC, and, you know, he starts trashing Bernie, and just take a look at the clip.
We go the way of the British Labour Party. If we nominate Jeremy Corbyn, it's going to be the end of days. If the British Labour Party would have nominated David Miliband, they'd be in power. So I am scared to death. I really am. And I think people gonna, you know, and I think I'm waiting. I hope these African American voters themselves. You know, I grew up in Nibbeville Parish, Louisiana. I live in Orleans Parish, Louisiana. I know 10 times more African Americans than most people I know. And they're looking for somebody that can come in and not just excite them, but talk about things that really matter to them in everyday life. They're not interested in socialism and the revolution and all that foolishness you hear. They're interested in somebody that's going to come to them and articulate a vision as to how they fit into this country and what's their relationship and what kinds of things that the schools that kids go to, the health care their parents receive, the wages they receive. That's what matters to people. And if we lose that, we're going to lose it. We're going to be the British Labour Party. We're going to be out in some theoretical left-wing la-la land.
I mean, that's just ironic. He's saying like, oh, people are not interested in socialism, but they care about their wages. Yep. Bernie Sanders is literally the person who brought about the whole conversation about a $15 minimum wage. Unbelievable. You know, like he'll take the thing that Bernie Sanders is fighting for and then say like, oh, no, Bernie Sanders ain't offering you that. What? Next, he's going to say like, oh, you know, people don't care about socialism. They just want universal health care. Yeah, we know. This is just crazy, man. It's really dystopian. And also, his point about the Labour Party, I think he gets this completely wrong because the problem in the UK is that Jeremy Corbyn is unfortunately really unpopular, you know, which is a sad thing to say because his economic policies, the Labour manifesto for 2019 was really good. I did a video on this when the elections were happening in December. They had a great manifesto. They really did. And people, they voted against Labour because there was no clear position on Brexit. Okay, so you had no clear position on Brexit, and unfortunately, Jeremy Corbyn isn't as popular as you'd like. Now, when you look at Bernie Sanders, I mean, there's no comparison here. Bernie Sanders is de facto the most popular politician in the country since the last election. I mean, that's just the numbers, man. Like, that's the facts. So I don't think that's a fair comparison. Like, yeah, you can people do like to draw comparisons between Bernie and Corbyn. There are some to be made. They even had similar speeches, sure. But in terms of popularity, no, you can't make a comparison there because Bernie Sanders is infinitely more popular in the US than Jeremy Corbyn is in the UK. I mean, Bernie Sanders is a rock star in terms of popularity. Jeremy Corbyn, not so much. I don't see Jeremy Corbyn filling up a stadium of people every day or every night. Bernie Sanders, he does. So you can't draw a comparison like that. Also, the irony of him talking about, oh, we're going to end up like the Labour Party. Dude, you worked for Bill Clinton. Remind me what happened to Hillary when she ran? Huh? Thank you very much. You want to talk about losing? Just look at Hillary. Okay. I mean, that's just the goddamn irony, right? The irony. If you want to talk about losing, I mean, look no further than Hillary Clinton. So as you can see, this is not just something limited to the hosts on MSNBC or on CNN. It's also the guests. They bring them on, they give them the mic, and they're like, all right, you got 5 minutes? Attack Bernie. Just do your thing. That's how they do, man. So yeah, in effect, Bernie Sanders has a big MSNBC problem. Matter of fact, I just say mainstream media problem. Period. They hate him. And this guy really represents a threat to them because the more popular he gets, the more they attack him. It's just completely out in the open. I mean, they're not even trying to hide it anymore. You know, they just bring on anyone who's willing to call Bernie Sanders a communist and they give them the microphone and they're like, just do your thing. All right. It's really crazy. So I think this is an indication that the establishment is getting increasingly more nervous and shaken by the grassroots movement that Bernie Sanders is moving forward with. It's really clear that they're not happy about this. Now, like I said, I think if Bernie Sanders gets the nomination and as time goes by and his momentum grows even more and more and he wins more primary states, it's going to get worse. And just to further prove to you how hostile MSNBC is towards Bernie Sanders, it's so bad that it actually makes people want to vote for Bernie Sanders. Because the bias is so clear. The hatred is so overt. Take a look at this clip. This was live on MSNBC. This is a voter. And look what she told them.
I want to say the reason I went for Bernie is because of MSNBC. And very,
Go on.
I think it is completely cynical to say that he's lost 50% of his vote from the last time when there were two candidates. Now there are multiple wonderful candidates who would be great presidents and people that I think that we can unify and get behind. But the kind of the stop Bernie cynicism that I heard from a number of people, I watch MSNBC constantly, so I heard that from a number of commentators, and so it made me angry enough. I said, okay, Bernie's got my vote.
This is such an interesting point. What you're saying is, and we take criticism because we're journalists, right? We got to be open-minded. You're saying that hearing from people, whether it's guests, contributors, the conversations you've heard, that you felt were designed to tear down Senator Sanders or quote-unquote stop him, actually endeared him to you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I could have chosen several candidates, but that's what pushed me over the edge for Bernie.
That's really interesting, and thank you for sharing it. See, I knew you were complex.
I mean, look at that, man. The proof is in the pudding, man. When you go after Bernie Sanders, you just galvanize his base and others, too, who are undertaking some form of critical thinking into supporting him. Okay? It's going to backfire in the end. It can't go on forever. And essentially what she was referring to also was that Chuck Todd, he made some kind of ridiculous statement that because Bernie Sanders doesn't have as many votes as he did in 2016, that he is not the front runner. I mean, as she just said, there are more people running this time. So obviously the votes are going to be more fractured. That's inevitable. And even then, even with the votes fractured, Bernie is still coming out on top. If anything, that should tell you that he is the front runner and the most solid candidate there is. I mean, he bagged 23 states last time when it was just a two-person race, him and Hillary, right? They were neck and neck. They had to cheat to get Bernie out of it. And this time, you had like something like 30 candidates running, right? Now you have like a 9-person race since a lot of them dropped out. And even then, Bernie Sanders is still coming out on top. In New Hampshire, in Iowa, in all the polls, national polls. In the fundraising, I mean, it goes on and on. Number of volunteers. We can do this all day. With the endorsements, you see, it don't stop. That was a really embarrassing moment for MSNBC, and it exemplifies, it embodies the disdain that they have towards Bernie Sanders, the hatred. I mean, it's right there. You know, she's telling you, this is a viewer of MSNBC. She's telling them to their faces that, yeah, you hate Bernie Sanders so much. You're doing so much shady stuff to tear him down that I actually want to vote for him now because I know that he's the one if you're trying so hard to go after him. Beautiful. Poetic justice right there.